Oh, by the way, did you hear that they finally found that lost episode of Sesame Street? You know, the one with the Wicked Witch of the West you keep hearing about? Yeah, I always thought it was just some kind of urban legend. You know, it's only a made-up story, but it turns out to be true, and you can check it out online now. It's honestly crazy. We're on. Right when he started playing with puppets while still studying in school, Jim already began his career with the Muppets by innovating the medium of puppetry. Their unique talent of blending the puppet skills of Jim and his team, the capabilities of television, and his wacky style of humor quickly got them climbing up the ladder to become recognizable entertainers in the Washington, D.C. area with their own show called Sam and Friends, and then later in front of the whole nation with guest appearances on late shows and crazy commercials like the ones for Wilkins Coffee. But one of the biggest landmarks of Henson's lifetime wouldn't happen until the late 1960s when he teamed up with the Children's Television Workshop in order to make Sesame Street, which was both a blessing and a curse. I mean, of course, it's an awesome thing to be a part of the creation of the greatest preschool series of all time. But in terms of Jim's goal, this was a major setback. You see, Jim wanted the Muppets to break the perception that puppets are just for kids and have them be viewed as valid entertainment for everyone. But now that Jim and the Muppets are forever associated with a show primarily made for toddlers, it's going to be very tough for adults to take them seriously. However, it would not be impossible. In the 1970s, Jim and his team found themselves in a new variety show, one that would revolutionize television and have a legacy that is on par with Sesame Street. It was the perfect opportunity to prove that the Muppets can be beloved by adults as much as they are with children. And that show was Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
As Sesame Street was unfortunately cementing the public's perspective that puppets are strictly children's entertainment, Jim Henson did continue making more family-friendly Muppet TV specials outside of the street. These include 1970's The Great Santa Claus Switch and Tales from Muppet Land, which the latter expanded what the team started with Hey Cinderella by adapting more fairy tales with Kermit the Frog, like The Frog Prince in 1971, and The Muppet Musicians of Bremen in 1972. During those specials, he and his team had to create even more Muppets, some of whom would later become familiar stars. And Jim's crew became even bigger with new members building and performing the Muppets like Bonnie Erickson, Fran Brill, Faz Fazakis, John Lovelady, and Dave Goelz. But still, even when the Muppets were getting bigger and were making a great amount of money thanks to the profits from Sesame Street, Jim still had that desire to expand his audience beyond children. As he was looking to find ways to prove that his Muppets can also be enjoyed by adults, his agent, Bernie Brillstein, helped Jim by introducing him to another client of his, comedian and producer Lorne Michaels. In the mid-1970s, Michaels was developing a variety series with Dick Ebersol and NBC that would feature comedy sketches, satires, and music performances called Saturday Night Live, or NBC's Saturday Night as it was initially called, just to avoid confusion with Howard Cosell's short-lived variety show of the same name on ABC. Some of the first cast members even included other talents represented by Brillstein like Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, and Gilda Radner. Upon hearing this new show, Henson knew that they would be the key to present how the Muppets can also be adult-oriented. And so, when the team joined SNL, Jim created a recurring skit called The Land of Gorch, which featured a royal family in a fantasy-like land far, far away that was heavily grotesque by being filled with alcohol and sexual innuendos. The first segment aired at the same time as Saturday Night Live's premiere on October 11th, 1975. And out of all of Jim Henson's creations throughout his career, there is debatably none that is more hated than The Land of Gorch.
Some people are never satisfied.
Over the years, critics agreed that the segments were among the weakest of the first season of SNL, and the raunchy tone, along with the ugly characters, are said to be the complete opposites of Kermit and what the Muppets are known for. But if there's one group of people that hated the Land of Gorch more than anyone else, it was the cast and crew of Saturday Night Live. Since the segments had to be written by the show's writers instead of Henson's team due to the Writers Guild of America's regulations, they felt like they were the worst parts of working on SNL, where the team resorted to drawing straws to see who would end up writing the next Gorch segment.
Okay, so he's just upset because Lauren wants us to write sketches for the Muppets.
I don't write for felt.
Speaking of which, according to SNL writer Alan Zweibel, Michael O'Donoghue would later express his annoyance by literally lynching a Big Bird doll with the Venetian blinds. Then again, he is the same writer for National Lampoon who accepted a stack of dynamite as a fan gift, so, is it really that shocking? As for the series actors, they also despised the skits because they were taking time away from the actual cast. And John Belushi, despite having a good relationship with the Muppet crew, famously referred to them as the Mucking Fuppets. Eventually, because of the creative conflicts between the writers and Jim, they all agreed to end The Land of Gorch, which aired in only 16 episodes throughout Season 1, and have an additional and final appearance on the premiere of Season 2.
It is humiliating to put a dust cover upon your spiritual god.
While disappointing that his attempt to reach an adult audience with SNL was a total failure, this did not discourage Jim one bit. In fact, while he still had plenty of respect for Michaels and Saturday Night Live, he was already in the process of taking his Mucking Fuppets and put them in their own variety show. One where Jim teamed up with Kermit once again to create the most sensational, inspirational, celebrational, Muppetational show ever made. Yes, it's about mucking time that we look into what we call the Muppet Show. The Muppet Show. As the title suggests, the series is about the Muppets putting on a show, where the host, Kermit the Frog, does his best to keep some order on his weekly theatrical presentations and make sure that their human guest stars are doing fine amongst all the chaos that his Muppet friends are causing. All mixed with musical acts, recurring comedy sketches, and all sorts of madness that these Muppets know how to do best. Like I said before, ever since the great initial success of Sesame Street, Jim was pursuing to prove that the Muppets can entertain everyone, including adults. Early in that journey, not only was he aiming for a weekly series starring the Muppets, but he also considered the possibility of making his show a live stage production on Broadway, and thought about different titles for it like An Evening with the Muppets Get It Together, or The Muppets in Concert. But he inevitably dropped the Broadway thought in 1973. For Jim and the gang, that Muppet Show would be a golden opportunity. For executives, however, they didn't see it that way. Mainly because of Sesame Street, they found it hard to believe that puppets, especially the ones by Jim Henson, could entertain anyone other than children. The only network that was willing to give Henson a chance with this idea was ABC, since one of their young executives, Michael Eisner, was a fan of the Muppets and wanted to see what Jim had in mind for a new weekly series. He agreed to fund a pilot of a weekly Muppet Show, which the team took the opportunity to turn it into a holiday special called The Muppets Valentine Show. The special featured a plot where the host, Wally, struggled with writer's block as he's trying to write about what is love. In his house, his Muppet friends, including Kermit, try to help him out through sketches, musical numbers, and having Mia Farrow come in as a special guest and aid them with finding the meaning of love.
But it all goes to prove that love is everywhere.
Yeah, especially here. You are all such lovely people.
When the Valentine special aired on January 30th, 1974, it turned out to be a good hit. Critics and audiences enjoyed it, and ABC was happy with the results where it allowed Jim to produce more specials and pilots for the network. When the team went on to work on the second pilot, They were sure that this would be the one that would get them their weekly series for an older audience. To highlight that, and to comment how television was back then, he titled the pilot The Muppet Show, Sex and Violence, referencing the opening where Crazy Harry blows up some stone pillars that spell the words.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the end of sex and violence on television.
In this pilot, it puts more emphasis on the variety aspect, presenting numerous of comedy sketches that jump in between each other, and a small plot line where the host, Nigel, prepares to put on a pageant of the 7 deadly sins. Unlike the last pilot, where it was well received, Sex and Violence was not. Critics find that the variety aspect made the special feel a little too scattered and unfocused, the humor was not landing well, the editing made the pacing a bigger joke than the comedy, and the host was more bland than the felt that he was made from. Because of this pilot's failure, this put Jim back to square one, where he had to find someone who believed in his series and that the Muppets can entertain a general audience. Armed with only a 25-minute pitch reel he made with IBM executive David Laser that included an original sketch where a Muppet extravagantly tries to sell the show to potential networks.
The United States of America needs the Muppet Show, and you should buy this show. Now, we're not pulling any punches here. I mean, there's nothing subtle about this pitch. So buy the show and put it on the air.
There was one moment where he had a chance in New York where Jim and his crew worked on Saturday nights, but again, we all know how that mucking story went. But then came Lord Lou Grey, a British television mogul who had an interest in what Jim was doing with the Muppets, even producing a couple of specials with him during the early 1970s. When he heard of Henson's troubles with his new project, he decided to call Brillstein and agreed to finance his show with $3 million to make 24 episodes, but only on the condition that they moved to London, England in order to produce. Without even talking to Jim about it, Brillstein agreed. And when he told Henson about it afterwards, he could not have been happier.
I love you.
I think you laid it on a teensy bit thick there, old pal.
Once Henson settled in London, Jim, his longtime writing partner Jerry Jewell, and comedian Jack Burns, who was hired by Grey to be the show's head writer, started by laying the groundwork of what the show would become. They looked at the 2 pilots that were made and analyzed upon what they did right and wrong to see how they could take the best of both into their new show. Their solution was to have the story that goes through the entire episode, the musical segments, and the weekly guest star of the Valentine show, and the comedy sketches, some of the characters, and the theme of putting on a show from Sex and Violence. However, they also had to find the right balance between storytelling and variety so that it doesn't lean too heavily on the story to make the episode feel like it's dragging itself, or to be dependent on the variety to make it feel disorganized and cluttered. When it came to casting the Muppets themselves for the series, most of them originate from the pilots. From the Valentine show, there was George the Janitor and Crazy Donald, who was renamed Crazy Harry in the Sex and Violence pilot, along with the occasional appearances of Mildred, Miss Mousie, and the Kuzbanians. As for Sex and Violence, there was Nigel's co-stars, Sam the Eagle and Floyd Pepper, whom the latter is the basis for the show's band, The Electric Mayhem, which also features Dr. Teeth, Janice, Zoot, and Animal, as well as Statler and Waldorf, who moved up to the balcony where they could regularly heckle the acts, and the Swedish Chef. The team even recycled Muppets from other specials to play a bigger role in the show, such as Robin and Sweetums from The Frog Prince, a Frackle in the Cigar Box in The Great Santa Claus Switch was turned into Gonzo the Great, along with bringing on board Thog, and a rising star that briefly appeared in a Herb Alpert special in 1974 was brought in to take center stage as Miss Piggy.
Herbie, I'd like you to meet Piggy. Piggy doll, this is Herbie, baby. This is your letter to success, Piggy doll. I've been telling him all about you.
Hello, Mr. Alpert.
Beautiful, beautiful.
However, not every Muppet came from a past project. The team still created some new members, including Fozzie Bear, the show's comedian, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, the resident scientist, the Muppet News reporter, and Wayne and Wanda. a singing duo whose acts always end in failure.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather.
But then there was just one more important character. The host who would be the star of the series and keep the entire madness together. And I don't just mean the madness within the Muppet Theater, but also among Jim's team who were having a hard time trying to find their respective characters' personalities. He couldn't bring back the old hosts from the pilots because they completely scrapped Wally, and Nigel was demoted to the show's conductor. As Jim was obviously going to perform the main character, he looked back at his two old friends as possible candidates. He did consider Rolf, but then he decided that since his popularity wasn't what it used to be, he'd work best as the show's pianist. But then there was Kermit the Frog. Over the years, Jim still teamed up with Kermit in numerous of projects. As previously mentioned, Kermit still showed up in Sesame Street, the Tales from Muppet Land specials, the two pilots, and on talk shows to promote Jim's latest projects. Eventually, Kermit became Jim's alter ego, kind of like whom Henson would be if he was a Muppet, at least personality-wise. And since the series was just like how Jim was running it with his crazy team of puppeteers, this ultimately made Kermit the perfect choice to become the host of The Muppet Show.
Well, Kermit's function on the show is very much like my own, in that he's trying to hold together this group of crazies. And that's not unlike what I do.
With the plans in place, all they needed to do now was to get the guest stars in order to help attract potential networks to air the show, which proved to be a more difficult task than expected. Bernie Brillstein was having quite a hard time trying to find celebrities willing to appear for the show. Then again, flying to London with little pay in order to work on a potential show with Jim Henson's Muppets for a week didn't sound like a great offer. At best, Brillstein was only able to get two people he knew to come in as a favor for the first two episodes, Juliet Prowse and Connie Stevens. Originally, at the end of each episode, the guest would receive a Muppet version of themselves as a gift for working on the show. But soon after the first two episodes, the idea was scrapped for being both too expensive and too complicated for the team to continue. And so, after taking the time to create the two episodes of the series in early 1976, finally bringing Jim Henson's vision of a Muppet Show for everyone to life, nobody wanted it.
Oh, come on! What is it this time? I mean, we've already gotten this far, and the Muppet Show is already becoming what we know and love by now. What is it this time? Why is it that executives are not picking up the Muppet Show? What the fridge? Let's see here. Okay. The theme song went on for way too long. The comedy is too British for American audiences, and some of the background scenes don't work. Huh. I see. Well, technically, Lou Gray did order 24 episodes, so at least at some point, they gotta get it right with one of them. Am I right? Okay, everyone, let's get back to work!
After facing more rejections, the team took the opportunity with the next episodes to improve upon their mistakes. On top of fixing the reasons why networks still didn't want The Muppet Show, they wrote new sketches that would become staples to the show, like Veterinarian's Hospital. And the performers, like Frank Oz and Dave Goelz, took the opportunity to improve upon their main characters and build their identities better, like Gonzo for Dave and Fozzie and Miss Piggy for Frank. While Richard Hunt was given a new main Muppet to perform in the show called Scooter, Kermit's gopher.
Yeah, I'll go for coffee, I'll go for sandwiches, I'll go for anything you need.
They also emphasized more on the elements that did work, like the musical numbers, which can go in a wide variety of genres, but all still deliver the same crazy humor that the Muppets are known best. The numbers also took great advantage of the talent of the guest stars, which was exactly what they did with their next two guests, Joel Grey and Ruth Buzzy. And from there, the more improvements that they made to the show, the better it started to be, and the more confident the team became in their own work. As part of the deal with Grade, they agreed to release the episodes in syndication, where it would be released on ATV in the UK and to whatever network was interested in distributing it everywhere else in the world. In the case of the United States, 5 stations from CBS agreed to put on the first season. On September 5th, 1976, The Muppet Show made its premiere with the Joel Grey episode in the UK and the Rita Moreno episode in the US on September 20th, and the first impressions seemed to be pretty good. While it was noticeable that they were still trying to improve upon their issues, they were off to an entertaining start, which at least gave the team a boost to keep working hard on the rest of the first season. And from there, the more episodes that were released, the more that the viewership started to grow, and the more that the producers were able to sell the show to more stations. In the UK, it was almost immediately a sensational hit. By Christmas of 1976, the show had already gathered around 14 million viewers, and demands to air the show across the world started to pour in. Of course, with this level of rising success, a second season was ordered, and the team was ready to make the show better than ever before. Jack Burns left as the head writer, which put Jerry Jewell in charge of the writing team, as they took out or minimized some of their weaker sketches in favor of adding new ones that would become fan favorites like Pigs in Space. Also, the performers finally nailed their respective characters and were ready to make the most out of them in the show, including Frank Oz, who fully took on the role of Miss Piggy instead of sharing it with Richard Hunt.
Oh, light of my life, frog of my arms, at last we are alone. Does one ever encounter sharks in these parts?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Never. Why do you ask?
Just curious.
They also added new Muppets to join the cast, including an assistant for Dr. Bunsen Honeydew named Beaker, and the Swine Trek crew alongside Miss Piggy in Pigs in Space, the leader Link Hogthrob, and Dr. Julius Strangepork, who was previously Dr. Naga from the segment Return to Beneath the Planet of the Pigs in the Sex and Violence pilot. As for the special guest stars, from their experience with the first season, the show gathered a reputation to give their guests the best time they could have when working on The Muppet Show, giving them the choice of what kind of acts they want to do, rather it be doing some comedy with certain characters, or sing or dance to whatever song they like, giving them a prominent spotlight on their episode, and always making sure that they were doing fine during production, which was all supervised by David Laser. Some of them later got a chance to be a part of the writing team of their own episodes, like John Cleese. This reputation quickly spread around the industry, and it made finding celebrities much easier by season 2. In fact, they were able to get some of Jim's idols in the show, like Edgar Bergen and Milton Berle. By the end of 1977, Jim's ultimate mission with The Muppet Show was finally accomplished. The series became a phenomenon all around the world, and the public was viewing the Muppets as entertainment icons in their own right. Not just for children, but for everyone young and old. Around the making of the third season, some changes among the team were made. Puppet designer Bonnie Erickson left to make her own company, and the Muppets' master builder, Don Saline, passed away in May of 1978. In return, Amy Van Gilder replaced Erickson's position, and a new puppeteer joined the group named Steve Whitmire. The show also upgraded their stage, where they added a cafeteria, where they included new Muppets to the cast, like the cafeteria lady Gladys, Lou Zealand and his Boomerang Fish Act, Camilla, Gonzo's chicken girlfriend, and Beauregard, the show's new dim-witted janitor that replaced George, whom the latter only appeared in season 1. By the time they finished up the fourth season, the popularity of the Muppets and the show were at an all-time high, and it was even considered one of the biggest series on television during its time. However, as an artist, Jim didn't want to be restrained to just working on a few popular shows like this and Sesame Street. he had a need to pursue bigger projects and explore what else he could do with puppetry. And the royalties that he was getting from the series was more than enough for him to fund his next big plans, as well as wanting to end the series on a high note instead of letting it go on until it lost its relevancy. And so they announced that the 5th season of The Muppet Show would be its last, with the Shirley Bassey episode in the UK on March 15th, 1981, and the Melissa Manchester episode in the US on June 8th of that year to cap it all off. However, more fittingly, the last episode that the team recorded was with Gene Kelly, which featured a theme of the end of the world.
Are you ready for the end of the world?
Sure, it couldn't be worse than this show.
Upon that conclusion, The Muppet Show gathered a grand total of 120 episodes across 5 seasons. Also, during its airing, the Muppets were a strong force during awards season, where it gathered a total of 21 Emmy nominations and winning 4 of them, one of which was given to Rita Moreno for her guest appearance. Bernadette Peters and Peter Sellers also received a nomination for their guest roles. The show also received 9 BAFTAs and winning 3 of them, winning a Grammy Award, a Peabody Award, a Golden Camera, and a Golden Rose at the Rose d'Or Light Entertainment Festival. When it was time to bring the series to home media, they started by releasing compilations on video cassettes starting in 1985, and then later on DVDs for the show's 25th anniversary. It wouldn't be until 2005 when Disney released the first season of The Muppet Show on DVD, then the second in 2007, and the third in 2008.
I know that they aren't in the best condition, but keep in mind that I've had them since they were first released, and I used to watch them a lot, so let's just say that they were very much cherished.
Also, Disney was planning to release a DVD set of the 4th season featuring Gonzo in the cover, but it ultimately never happened, leaving season 4 and 5 without a complete home media release.
I've been waiting for Disney to release seasons 4 and 5 of The Muppet Show. I've got 1, 2, and 3. I need seasons 4 and 5. Are you listening, Disney? Seasons 4 and 5.
It wouldn't be until February 19th, 2021, when Disney made another major release of The Muppet Show, this time putting almost the entire series on their streaming platform, Disney+. However, there are a handful of segments that are missing due to not securing the music rights. The same also happened to a few episodes in their entirety, including the John Denver and Spike Milligan episode in several countries in Europe, and the Brooke Shields episode worldwide. The Chris Langham episode was also completely removed because... Actually, let's not talk about why the Chris Langham episode is missing. Don't worry about it.
It's a classic show business story. Chris Langham walked into this theater a nobody.
And he's walking out a has-been.
Much like the public's perception of animation, Jim was faced with the biggest obstacle to prove that puppetry is much more than just children's entertainment, a viewpoint which he indirectly helped solidify. He spent years preparing the right formula for a Muppet Show for everyone, and turned it into one of the biggest shows on television that was considered the Sesame Street for older audiences. But most significantly, it was the show that defined who Kermit the Frog is. Beforehand, he was just a character that Jim often carried around. But with this series now considered his official home where he became the main star, it truly defined him as Henson's alter ego. The frog who does his best to maintain all the madness around him for the sake of putting on a show and entertaining people. The secret to the series' success is that it was made exactly like how they presented it on TV. It's a bunch of crazy characters doing the most ridiculous things with the weekly guest star as they sing and dance and make everybody laugh in the most unexpected ways. And that is what we call The Muppet Show. During the middle of The Muppet Show's production, Jim was already thinking about bigger and more ambitious projects he wanted to do. As much as television was the medium that fueled his passion throughout his life, he started to set his sights on a much bigger screen, and his new cast of colorful characters, along with his old friend Kermit, are the perfect stars to help him bring Jim to the movies. They were already sensational on The Muppet Show, but now it's time to get things started with the Muppet Movie. It's the origin story of how the whole gang got together. After an agent recommended Kermit to try out an audition in Hollywood, the frog decided to leave his home in the swamp and head west to pursue his dream of making millions of people happy with his talents. Along the way, he meets several other crazy characters that share the same dream, like Fozzie, Gonzo, the Electric Mayhem, Miss Piggy, and more, along with a desperate businessman named Doc Hopper, who wants to make Kermit the mascot of his Frog Legs restaurant chain and would stop at nothing to get what he wants. So now Kermit, along with his new friends, go on a cross-country journey to escape Hopper's pursuit and head to Hollywood to make the dream happen. Soon after The Muppet Show first became a success on television, Jim went to ask Lou Grade about the chance to make a movie with the Muppets, along with $8 million to finance the film. It was a big order that Henson was making, especially when Grade had very little experience working on feature films, but it was tough for him to say no to Jim and his passion, so he agreed to the plan. As they were starting the third season, Jim was also starting the blueprints of his movie with the show's head writers. Jack Burns was in charge of the draft, while Jerry Jewell took that to write the script. Also, Jim wanted the feature to be a musical with original songs, so he hired a man whom he also trusted and formed a bond with. Beforehand, he collaborated with Henson by being one of the guest stars during the first season of The Muppet Show and writing the lyrics for the songs of the 1977 holiday special Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. That man was composer and songwriter Paul Williams, and upon getting on board with the movie, Williams brought in Kenneth Asher as a collaborator, whom the two previously worked together in 1976's A Star Is Born. Williams also had a cameo in the movie playing the pianist in the El Sleazo Cafe.
Showtime! Showtime at the El Sleazo!
Originally, Asher was meant to be in charge of the score, while Williams would focus more on the lyrics. However, when it was time to literally make the music, Kenny had to step out so that he could take care of his new baby girl, leaving Paul to additionally work on one of his biggest challenges yet of scoring the entire Muppet movie. As for the director, as much as Jim wanted to take the job, the executives didn't really trust him with that position, since he never had any experience directing features, which was why Jim went on to hire James Frawley to take the helm. Right at the start, the team knew that the first task they had to face was to bring the Muppets where they have never gone before: outside. So as the script was being developed, Henson, Frawley, and Frank Oz went out to the fields to test some footage with Kermit and Fozzie to see how they would look under the natural light, and if it would even be possible for them to perform out of the studio.
That's for Samuel.
Who?
Samuel.
Who's Samuel?
Our first.
Our first what?
That's
Wait a minute. Our first what?
And see that?
Do you know what you get when you cross a frog and a pig?
Are you going to say it?
You get a bouncing baby pig. That's what you get.
In the summer of 1978, the Muppet team all moved to California to go begin the principal photography and make their first movie, which gave them both a high amount of excitement and stress that the only way they could learn how to make a movie is by making this movie and hope that they end up getting it right on their first try. What is often considered to be the most iconic moment of the Muppet movie is the first scene where, in the middle of the swamp, Kermit is seen playing the banjo and singing a little song to himself.
The rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
When writing The Rainbow Connection, Paul Williams and Kenny Asher wanted to create a song that perfectly captures who Kermit the Frog is and the charm of his personality, similarly to what Joe Raposo tried to accomplish when he wrote Being Green for Sesame Street. In his own words, Williams stated, "To me, Kermit has always been an every frog. In the midst of chaos, he is the calm voice going, "Wait a minute, don't panic, we can get out of this." We wanted to write a song that really shows that this is a frog with an inner life. He's a frog that knows culture, that is sensible, that has a spiritual life. At the same time, the duo wanted to capture the same feeling as When You Wish Upon a Star from Walt Disney's Pinocchio to have a song that would start the feature with an inspirational message that would establish an uplifting and heartfelt tone for the picture. But what was possibly more challenging than the song itself was what the Muppet team had to do in front of the camera. This scene was the first time ever in puppet history that a hand puppet like Kermit shows his full body on film while still being performed, and the puppeteer is still hidden on sight.
And you know what the craziest thing about all this is? Unlike what I'm doing right now, none of what you see here is green screened. It is exactly what it actually is. It's Kermit playing the banjo in the swamp. Now, you might be wondering though, wait, does that mean that Jim is performing Kermit underwater that whole time? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, he was. In fact, let me tell you what the crew did with this thing. With the help of special effects guru Robbie Knott, they actually created this diving bell, which it was only big enough for Jim to fit in, along with having a little hose so that he could breathe and a monitor so that he could see what he was doing with Kermit. Meanwhile, Steve Whitmire and a new puppeteer named Kathy Mullen, they were on the side so that they would go and control Kermit's arm so that it looks like he was actually playing the banjo. Now, are there easier ways to pull all this off? Well, yes, even back then, there were probably ways to make things easier. But it's that insane amount of dedication that allowed this entire effect and for this whole scene to work perfectly. And the best part about it is, this was only the beginning of their technical ambitions.
On top of the Rainbow Connection scene, the team also elevated their techniques that they've previously tried, but now made it bigger and better for the feature, including Kermit riding a bicycle, which he first did in the Muppets Valentine show, and then later during the opening of Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. In the movie, they used a marionette system on a crane that moved the bike with strings that the camera couldn't see, and the rest of Kermit's movements were controlled remotely. And if riding a bike wasn't impressive enough, they also had Fozzie driving the Studebaker and later on the station wagon. It was definitely a tight squeeze in the car with up to 4 puppeteers all performing the Muppets, especially in the Studebaker, but for the shots actually showing them driving, they hired a little person driving the car in the back with a monitor showing where they were driving. Another upgrade they pulled off was when Kermit and Fozzie were on stage in the El Sleazo Cafe, where the team polished their green screen skills to make it look like the entire body of the Muppets are coming to life. Actually, I meant blue screen because green screens would just make Kermit disappear. Also, even if used for a short moment, there was the giant animal head that Jim himself insisted to be large scale instead of a miniature. In an interview with Robbie Knott, he said that it took months for 4 or 5 people to build the 15-foot mechanical head and a set of hands that would end up getting cut from the movie. Knott also said that the biggest challenge was how to make it cheaply and that it would look good from a distance. However, not every ambitious effect they wanted to pull off made it to the final film. Originally, Stellar and Waldorf would have occasionally appeared in the feature to do their usual heckling. During the Movin' Right Along number, the duo would have showed up riding Sopwith the camel while making their comments. Ultimately though, their scenes were cut out with only a few exceptions.
Well, how do you like the film?
I've seen detergents that leave a better film than this.
Oh!
On top of the musical numbers, one element that the movie used that became a tradition of the Muppets is having a large list of cameos. While some made their first appearance with the gang in this film, like Mel Brooks, Carol Kane, Richard Pryor, and Orson Welles, Many of them previously appeared as special guests in the show, like Dom DeLuise, Madeline Kahn, Big Bird, Milton Berle, Bob Hope, Steve Martin, Cloris Leachman, and Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Which, speaking of Bergen, this marked as his final film appearance before he passed away shortly after he filmed his scene. Not only was this movie dedicated to him, but the crew even shut down production for a whole day for the puppeteers to go and attend Bergen's funeral. As Jim was determined to present the Muppets with their full bodies, like with the bike and dancing, he also got the crew to dig a hole on the ground for the puppet team to fit in, while additional crew members would control their feet to make them look like they were walking. But the biggest hole that they ever had to make was for the movie's grand finale. A pit that is 6 foot deep and 17 feet wide to fit a total of 137 puppeteers inside, consisting of Jim's team and the people from the Puppeteers of America who were all excited to perform a Muppet. Two people among that pit were those that we know today as very recognizable directors, Tim Burton and John Landis, which the latter was performing Grover. Also, there were over 250 of Henson's creations all singing the reprise of Rainbow Connection. And they weren't just most that appeared in The Muppet Show, but there was also the Muppets from Sesame Street, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, and even the Land of Gorch. As the team was very much excited to show their hard work to the public, they were going big with their marketing to really present the feature as a big deal, including a CBS special called The Muppets Go Hollywood, have the poster be created by famed movie poster illustrator Drew Struzan, which started a strong relationship between Drew, Jim, and the Muppets, and had one night where the Muppets hosted The Tonight Show.
And it's really a great honor for me to be here on The Tonight Show as the guest host. You see, what happened, they ran out of humans. I mean, NBC has had a lot of dogs, but never a frog.
When the Muppets made their big screen debut on May 31st, 1979 in the UK, and a few weeks later in the States on June 22nd, their rainbow glowed as brightly as they did on television, and it was one of the biggest movies of that summer, where critics adored the technical achievements with the puppetry, the strong and hilarious comedy, and the heart of the picture that showed the spirit of the Muppets and their love for entertaining people. And at the box office, it held the record for being the highest grossing puppet film for several decades by making $65.2 million domestically. But that wasn't the only reward that the feature earned. On top of the movie being a hit, it was also a legitimate competitor during award season, as the score and the song Rainbow Connection were both nominated for an Oscar, as well as winning a Grammy, a Saturn Award, and receiving additional nominations for another Grammy and a Golden Globe. Speaking of Rainbow Connection, it went on to become one of the most iconic songs from the Muppets and was even a top charting hit after the movie's release. So much so that it made it at number 74 on the American Film Institute's list of top 100 best movie songs, and in 2020, it was selected for preservation by the Library of Congress in the National Recording Registry. But it's not just the tune that received that honor. Several years prior in 2009, the Library of Congress added the Muppet movie for preservation in the National Film Registry. In 2019, the movie had a re-release to celebrate its 40th anniversary, and in the following year, there was an episode dedicated to the movie highlighting where many of the film's props are now in the Disney Plus series Prop Culture. Also, one of the Studebakers used in the film can today be found in the Studebaker National Museum in South Bend, Indiana. However, the condition of that car nowadays is in pretty rough shape, which is why the museum opened up a GoFundMe campaign to accept donations in order to not only repaint it the same way that the Electric Mayhem did, but to also make it fully operational again as it was during production. Over the years, many people have sung the praises of the Muppet movie, even going as far as calling it a significant cinematic masterpiece. But in a funny way, the movie can also be described as semi-autobiographical. Okay, maybe I'm using the term biographical very loosely here, but there can be some noticeable parallels between Kermit's adventure in the film and what Jim was trying to accomplish, as they both traveled to California in the hopes of accomplishing the same dream.
Yeah, well, I've got a dream too. But it's about singing and dancing and making people happy. That's the kind of dream that gets better the more people you share it with. And, well, I found a whole bunch of friends who have the same dream. And it kind of makes us like a family.
And after their time with the Muppet Show, not only have they proven that the Muppets can entertain everyone, but they have now become distinguishable entertainers in their own right, equally as prolific as the human guest stars they share the screen with. And no matter where they would be, either on television or in theaters, it was guaranteed to be a blast, both figuratively and literally, when the Muppets showed up. The Muppet Show may have been over, but everyone knew that it was only the beginning of the Muppets' legacy. They've done just what they set out to do, thanks to the lovers, the dreamers, and you. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this piece of Muppets history, then don't forget to subscribe for more exciting parts. Now that the Muppets have their own show and their own movie, what would be their next step? A Great Caper? New York City? We'll just have to find out on the next part. So until next time, see you later, dudes.
Have we ever said that this show is for the birds?
Yes, and we'll keep saying it till it gets a laugh.